As you are all well aware of, Justin Trudeau has announced his resignation as Prime Minister of Canada, and as such, the Liberal Party is in the process of picking a new leader who will become Canada's 24th Prime Minister and fight the next election against Pierre Poilievre. So let's have a quick talk about who's running, what they stand for, and that kind of stuff. Now, I was on a cruise while a lot of this was happening, so I had to do some back reading and didn't follow X all that closely. But what became notable early on is who decided not to run for leader. There are a lot of people who had been speculated for years as potential candidates who chose not to run. One was Melanie Joly, who decided that she didn't want to leave her job as Foreign Affairs Minister as Trump was taking office. For reference, cabinet ministers are expected to leave the cabinet when they are running for leader. Another was Anita Anand, who not only decided not to run for Liberal leader, but decided not to run for re-election in Oakville at all, in the face of not having a very good chance of winning her seat again. Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne also decided not to run, which was newsworthy because he was one of the best-known Quebecois ministers. And Steve McKinnon was also rumored to have been organizing a campaign, but decided not to run. The last two both cited the short timeline as their reason for not running for leader. The new leader will be named on March 9th, and candidates needed to declare their intention to run by January 23rd and qualify by January 27th. Former Premier of British Columbia, Christy Clark, had also prepared a team to run for leader of the party, but landed in hot water for blatantly lying on national television about never having been a Conservative Party member, when she was in fact a party member and voted for Jean Charest for leader. And she ultimately decided not to run. She also faced pushback with her lack of knowledge of French, which is something she has struggled with in the landscape of national politics, even though she had been working on her French before the campaign started. One of the minor candidates is former MP Frank Baylis. He was an MP from 2015 to 2019 when he decided not to run for re-election. He seems to be quite business-oriented and is running as more of an entrepreneur than a former politician. Another minor candidate is Ruby Dhalla, who was an MP from 2004 to 2011 in Brampton. She is probably the most right-wing Liberal leadership contender, calling herself Canada's Trump and calling for mass deportations and all that fun stuff. She is one of the more controversial candidates in her own right because of how she treated people around her while in office. A backbench MP named Chandra Arya was running too, but he got disqualified. He was running on abolishing the monarchy, getting rid of DEI policies, along with trying to be a centrist. But he was not allowed to run for unconfirmed reasons. There are several rumors as to why he was barred from running, like his connections with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, his admitted refusal to learn French.
How's your French?
Nope.
No French?
No French.
Disregard of the French language, or because Conservatives were a portion of the 400,000 new members who were flocking behind Arya. Another MP named Jaime Battiste from Nova Scotia was running to be the first Indigenous Prime Minister of Canada, but he dropped out very quickly and endorsed Mark Carney, a brilliant use of $50,000 if you ask me. Now that the backbench candidates are out of the way, let's look at our top 3 contenders, and before I name names, I want you to think about some of the politics going on around them. And a lot of this has to do with how close they tie themselves to Trudeau and some of his policies. All 3 of these people have made it some pledge, for example, to look over the carbon tax again, whether removing it or changing it in some way to have the consumer feel it less. Mark Carney was the first candidate out of the gate to announce a run. Mark Carney at first seems like a weird person to be running for Prime Minister of Canada. After all, he is best known for being the governor of the Bank of Canada, and he has 3 citizenships and has done a lot of work not in Canada. But he was born in Canada and did serve as the governor of the Bank of Canada during what happened to be the financial crisis of 2008. He got a decent amount of praise for his performance during the economic crisis and helped Canada avoid the worst of the crisis. He has been a rumored candidate for a while in the event Trudeau ever resigned, and Trudeau tried to court him as a candidate in the 2021 election. But he is seemingly quite popular among many Liberals, with a number of caucus endorsements. He is trying to run as an outsider candidate, someone who hasn't been directly involved with the Trudeau administration as of late, but is still opposed to the approach of Pierre Poilievre on economic issues. Even though this approach is somewhat flawed because Mark Carney has been very much on the inside of Liberal Party affairs for a while, but specifically, he wants to restore Liberal credibility on economic issues. His focus on the economy from his banking positions have helped him gain support among business Liberals and moderates who have been politically homeless the past few years. The other major candidate is Chrystia Freeland. You might recall that Chrystia Freeland is part of why we are where we are now. She was Trudeau's right-hand woman and Minister of Everything for multiple years, until December 16th, when she released her scathing resignation letter, which I and many others would argue was most of the reason that Trudeau finally resigned. She is running on her experience in government, particularly in dealing with Trump. Trump is a central part of her campaign, as evidenced by her launch video. She is arguing that her previous experience in government will assist in governing Canada through these tariff threats. The other candidate of note is Karina Gould. She has been the government House Leader since 2023 and served in various other cabinet roles prior, and has been the MP for Burlington since 2015. She is running closest to Trudeau's policies, vowing to continue many of the ones he's been fighting for this term. As a result of this, she's arguably considered the most left-wing of the leadership contenders. Because the two main frontrunners are both running on departing from many of Trudeau's policies, whereas she is only running on not increasing Trudeau's taxes. She is kind of running as the candidate for the youth in the party as well, and wanting to bring new energy. She has focused her campaign on continuing Trudeau's plan for the country, while also trying to mix in her reliability to the Canadian electorate, as she is the youngest candidate and a mother. The dynamics in this race to become the Prime Minister of a G7 country are surely going to be interesting. Mark Carney seems to be the consensus frontrunner, with many key cabinet endorsements and endorsements from people with organizational abilities behind him, and overall, the most caucus endorsements by a lot. However, Freeland also has a fair amount of caucus behind her and has actually been involved in electoral politics before, and not to mention that candidates have won leadership elections with less caucus support than other candidates, like Erin O'Toole winning this Conservative Party in 2020 despite having less caucus support than Peter MacKay. But also, the two frontrunners are actually friends. Mark Carney is Chrystia Freeland's son's godfather, but there's also a darker way of looking at this, because when Trudeau told Freeland she was going to be fired as finance minister, she was allegedly told that the plan was to replace her with Mark Carney, so more personal animosity there. There's also the Quebec factor. Quebecers might have a harder time picking a candidate to get behind. Mark Carney has Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly, a prominent Quebec organizer, behind him, but the consensus around him is that of the top three candidates vying for leader, he has the worst French. The language barrier is a real thing that does create difficulty for politicians trying to connect with Quebec voters. I've heard varying opinions on Freeland and Gould's French as well, so it could very well come down to who can resonate with these voters the best. Quebec will also be significant for whoever is elected as Liberal Party leader, as Montreal is historically a fortress for the Liberal Party. But what do you think? Who will be the next leader of the Liberal Party and Canada's 24th Prime Minister? And will they be able to claw back their huge poll deficit against the Polyev Conservatives? Let me know in the comments down below, but I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider leaving a like and subscribing, as that helps me out a lot. But apart from that, have a good rest of your day and see you.